Good morning. I'm Carol Costello. Thank you so much for joining me. It is now 31 minutes past the hour. Allegations of Big Brother abound this morning. Lawmakers blasting the Justice Department for secretly obtaining 2 months of phone records from journalists, and the IRS for targeting conservative groups, despite being questioned about the practice last year. Here's the former IRS Commissioner, Doug Shulman, assuring a congressional committee that such a thing could not possibly happen.
We pride ourselves on being a non-political, nonpartisan organization. There's absolutely no targeting. This is the kind of back and forth that happens when people apply for 501c4 status.
Okay, yet here we are investigating whether the IRS did indeed target Tea Party groups. One of the men who questioned the former IRS Commissioner, Congressman Kevin Yoder, he's on Capitol Hill this morning. Welcome, Congressman.
Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Oh, you're in Kansas City this morning, not Washington. I apologize. First question, do you think Mr. Shulman was lying, or he just didn't know?
Well, that's a very good question. We don't know what Mr. Shulman knew. I had a chance to ask him questions for a committee, asking him whether this targeting was going on, whether conservative groups or any groups, frankly, were being targeted based upon their ideology. He made it very clear that ever since the Richard Nixon era, the IRS would not tolerate such a thing, and that they had safeguards built into place. And you heard just there in the testimony, he said unequivocally, absolutely not. There is no targeting going on. And so we now know that not to be true. What we're going to have to find out is what Commissioner Shulman knew, what others knew, when they knew it, and what they did about it. If they knew nothing, then we've got some gross incompetence going on within the administration. If they did know things, then we have individuals lying to Congress. And so we've got to get to the bottom of that in the coming weeks as we investigate this very troubling, stunning admission the IRS made over the weekend.
That IRS search for political-sounding names started in 2010. Shulman was a Bush appointee. He's no longer the commissioner at the IRS. In your mind, if he didn't know about these things, I mean, what does that tell you about the organization? I know what you just said, but could it be that someone was operating without his knowledge?
Well, certainly possible, and there's certainly possible there was a cover-up, that folks were trying to hide this information. You know, originally the story was that only a few folks in Cincinnati had done this on their own. Over the last day or so, it's now become apparent that individuals in Washington knew about this, maybe even Acting Commissioner Miller knew about this. And so, I mean, we're just in the first few days of this controversy, and there's a lot of facts to learn, but I can tell you that many Americans are just tremendously troubled, Democrats and Republicans, that the IRS would engage in targeting political opponents for audits. It is the very worst of what people think goes on in Washington, D.C. And so, as members of Congress, we are arriving on Capitol Hill this week. We've got to get to the bottom of this. This can't happen again, and we need to find out who did what, when they knew things, and how far does this go to the top?
Well, I was just going to ask you about that. The president said if these things are true, people will be held fully accountable. What does that mean in your mind?
Well, that's a great question, because we've seen a lot of different situations, whether it's Fast and Furious or Benghazi, a variety of different things that, the president says individuals will be held accountable, people will be brought to justice. We don't ever see that. And so I think what the American people want to see is the administration as a whole held accountable. I'm not sure how the president can continue to say, these are things that happened without my knowledge, I was ignorant of them, and I'll hold people accountable, because ultimately it lies at the president's feet. These are things going on within his administration targeting opponents of the president. These are mostly groups that didn't support the president's reelection. Was there suppression of that information? The president said on Friday that he learned about this essentially by watching CNN. And you'd think that the president had greater access to information than following it on cable news like the rest of the country. And so if that's how the president's learning about these things, who in his administration is hiding these facts? Because we now know as well that the Inspector General's report was made apparent to high-ranking officials in the administration, that they knew this report was coming, and not till the very last minute did they even admit that this happened at the IRS. So why did the president then learn about it by watching TV? That's a real problem, I think, in terms of how...
A last question for you, and I'm just wondering. I know there's going to be, lawmakers will hold a hearing on this issue to get to the bottom of it. But if the IRS already admitted that mistakes were made, why can't someone just go in and fire whoever is responsible for those mistakes? Why do we have to go through this hearing?
Well, I think that's certainly going to be part of it. Well, because we want to know who knew what and when they knew it. You know, quite often it isn't just a rogue actor within an administrative agency that's acting. Quite often people at higher ranking levels knew about these types of things and they said nothing. And so that's a real problem if we have people in the president's, whether it's cabinet or within his administration, that are not coming forward to tell him about this. If I were him, I'd be very, very upset that this was going on and no one told me, and that no one's telling the American people. You know, when I asked Commissioner Schulman about this in 2012, he again said he's absolutely can assure us that this isn't happening. I think that's a real problem for the American people when appointees of the president come before Congress and assure us that there's no cause for concern, and we find out later that absolutely it was going on. So how did that happen, and how can we avoid that? And then we're going to look at criminal penalties going forward. Some have said this isn't illegal, that you can do this under the color of the law. That's a real problem for Americans, too, that this is even allowable. And so we're just really at the tip of the iceberg. This is one of those situations, maybe one of those rare moments where Democrats and Republicans both rightly are outraged, and we've got to get to the bottom of this on behalf of the American people.
All right, Congressman Kevin Yoder, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
In the next hour, I'm going to talk to Michigan Congressman Sander Levin. He's the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which will hold that hearing on the IRS's actions this Friday.